actually Google Hangouts. So if you've never used Google Hangouts before, it's actually a way, it's another very similar device to Zoom or WebEx, any of those types of webinars that you've used. What's great about this is there's a chat box, but I'll actually allow everyone to open up their microphones, their cameras, should they want that later on. But just know that it is optional, but I will just go ahead and jump into the presentation. I first want to thank Education USA for this opportunity. Originally, I was supposed to go out to the West Bank for the counselor event that was supposed to take place. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of things have been changing, and so I really want to thank Marwa and Sana for giving me this opportunity to still talk to you all about preparing your students for admissions and beyond. I actually saw a few people in the room here. You guys maybe help out with projects. Some are teachers, some are guidance counselors. I just thank you guys for all that you do, because I think that this is really an opportunity for your students to really see what it might be like to come and study in the United States. And just a fun fact, I actually was in Ramallah a few years ago. I want to say about 2 years ago. It is a beautiful place. I was happy to meet your students. I saw someone at the International Affairs at American Academy. I know I've been to like the Friends School, but I am really, really happy that you guys are all here today. So I'm just going to jump into this presentation. I'll introduce myself a little bit as well. So again, my name is Samantha Deleon. I'm the Associate Director for International Enrollment at Illinois Institute of Technology. I think the original reason for me being selected to be a representative for just higher education was because I had a background having worked at a large public university, to a liberal arts school, and now a specific technological institution. All of those schools have been in Illinois, but I'm happy to share what my experience has been. And so in regards to that, I think what's really great is we're going to talk a little bit about, I would say, like 3 pillars. We're going to talk about preparing your students for admissions. How can you create that strong application from a university admissions perspective? And again, I'm speaking on my experience having been at 3 different institutions in the United States. And then preparing your students beyond admission, transitioning from high school to university. What are the opportunities and the challenges? And then I hope that this works, but it's something called a Kahoot. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, but it's an interactive activity. It's almost like a fun quiz that we're going to take later on. So I hope that what you get out of this presentation is that you are able to prepare your students for the admissions, but also life after they leave high school and even beyond. And so because of that, I think what's going to be great is just kind of looking at this. Strong applications from university admissions perspectives. This really... Oh, hi there. I just asked that you mute your microphones. I'll have you guys all have that opportunity later to speak, but thank you for joining us. So in addition, knowing your students, what does that actually mean? Understand the students' academic and career goals. Knowing the special support requirements that might be also required for students. And hang on just a second, let me see if I can mute someone's mic. But if not, I just ask that you guys mute it yourself. So then that way we don't have to hear background noise. Thank you. In addition to that, so those special support requirements, what is in addition needed for students? And also knowing the academic admissibility as well as the affordability. I think these are the types of things that really help you understand the types of students that you have, that you are working with to get them into a university. And so what I mean by that is, I know that you know your students best. We've actually called you guys the influencers when it comes to higher education admissions. You know so much about the interests of the students. You also know the special support requirements in terms of perhaps what their parents are also looking for. In addition to that, we really also look for what do you know in terms of the academic admissibility and the affordability from your students' perspective. Now, from the flip end, these are things that you can know in order to prepare yourself and your students. So knowing the types of schools that do exist, there are so many institutions, large, mid-sized, small. I've heard that the largest institution in the United States actually has about 70,000 people. The smallest could have anywhere from 500 to maybe 2,000. I'm at a mid-sized institution with about 8,000 students, 5,000 at the graduate level with 3,000 at the undergraduate level. In addition, public versus private. I think that a lot of people hear, oh, well, publics are better because they're more affordable, or privates are more expensive. I think it all depends on doing a little bit of research to help your student out. So publics, if you're familiar with it, are usually maybe state sponsored. And so there might be an in-state and out-of-state tuition rate for students. And then you also have private institutions which might have a base rate. So when you look at sticker prices of these institutions, you might think, okay, a public versus private, it looks like this institution costs $70,000, where a public might have something that says $15,000 and maybe $30,000. What I just ask that you guys do is do a little bit more research, a little bit more digging, and feel free to connect with us as higher education professionals. In addition, know the types of student demographics that are on campus. Are most of those students coming from international locations? Are they coming from the United States? Are there diverse student bodies? Do they represent a number of maybe religious backgrounds? Do these students have really active student organizations? And so these are the types of things that you might not necessarily think about, or a student might think about at the beginning and while looking into institutions, but these are the things that really, I would say, encompass a student's experience at a university. In addition to this, we know this weather and location. I'm in the Chicagoland area. The weather, we have all 4 seasons, and as crazy as it sounds, it can happen in 1 week where it snows, it rains, it's windy, and all of a sudden it's really, really nice and warm outside. And so in addition to that, are your students better fit for an urban location, a more of a rural area, or a suburban location? I think all of these factors play a big role in where a student would thrive. Again, I talk a little bit about diversity, but to me, I think diversity is very important. The reason for that being is, do you want your student to be the only one who knows where Palestine is where that is, or perhaps they know where or an area is within the huge demographic of this United States? And so again, this comes down to knowing your students best and knowing the types of institutions that exist. So for example, I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, but when it came down for looking for an institution, I really gravitated towards a larger city, just because for me, I felt that there were opportunities in terms of internships, career opportunities, and those are some things that really impacted me and where I went to school. But in addition to that, I really thrived in a diverse environment. I wanted to be amongst students who came from all different backgrounds, different socioeconomic, different religious backgrounds, and I wanted to be in that area because I wanted to learn and I wanted to experience what it was like through a lens of someone else. In addition to that, the cost. I think this is one of the biggest key players when it comes to institutions and trying to help your student find the right fit. And so in regards to that, again, I talked a little bit about that public versus private. The private might have just one sticker price just because they aren't state funded. They don't have an in-state or out-of-state. However, just keep in mind that there are some opportunities for scholarships, which I'll talk a little bit about later. In addition to that, there are different types of institutions. I put down a 2-year versus a 4-year. A 2-year is considered a junior college or a community college. These are usually institutions that might not have the same testing requirements as that 4-year bachelor's degree seeking institution. And so when a student does apply into an institution, just know that that 4-year degree or a 4-year institution versus a 2-year will be a little different. So yeah, It says a lot. So I'm looking at some of your comments. Yes, feel free to use that comment box. I'm happy to answer questions as we go, but that way we'll keep this presentation going, and we do have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. That last bullet point there is that religious affiliation. You know, some students, whether, you know, some students and parents are thinking, you know what, I want a more religious affiliated school. Sometimes they tend to be a little bit more conservative. If you have a student coming from a conservative background, some students would feel more comfortable going to a non-denominational school that doesn't have a religious affiliation. That really comes down to the personal preference. But when you take that, knowing your students and knowing the types of schools that exist, that really comes down to helping your students find that right fit. And that's also something that you can do as an influencer. So I really do value what you all do in the field talking to students. And so when we go further and forward, knowing your students, this is something that is really, really important. Admissibility. So their academic goals. I think that, you know, when students come to you, whether you're a teacher, a guidance counselor, someone who works at Education USA, knowing what the goals of a student are very important. So I think that a student might really excel at mathematics or science courses or maybe history, but their career goal is to be an engineer. And so how do you then melt that background of being a good scientist with maybe being a good engineer, and knowing that those actually do go hand in hand? I think that there are a number of things that you can do in terms of helping your students get to where they want to be. And I think that it really comes down to, maybe there are examinations. You know, for us, I know personally, I more recently took something called an Enneagram test. And that Enneagram test allowed us to kind of understand what our strengths were. But then that can also translate into helping maybe your students along the way. Interest in certain subject areas. I think that there are so many students, and every university is going to say the same thing. We're looking for a well-rounded student. Well, what does that actually mean? I think really what it means is we're looking for students who are able to balance out their time in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Are they able to go from singing in the choir to maybe being part of the Model United Nations, to then also being an excellent student, because those academics also help us understand if that student is going to be successful at our institutions later on. And in regards to what I'm asking for when it comes to an interest in a certain subject area, if a student says to you, you know what, my goal is to play music or to be in choir, you know, and then they also might say, but my parents are really interested in me, you know, being an engineer or a doctor. You know, this is, I think, where knowing your students best is really going to be helpful, but also knowing the institutions. Does that university offer opportunities and outlets for a student to sing or perhaps play an instrument, but in addition to that, also go into the area of perhaps going into their engineering goals later on. And so these are really where it's most beneficial for you to know the type of students that do exist. The academic profile of a student is really important. You know, are they in a local curriculum? Are they at an international baccalaureate curriculum? Do they have opportunities for advanced placement at their school? These are the types of things that you know your student best. But knowing what they are capable of, you really don't know until like a student does apply to school. And so these are the types of things where I do recommend maybe you want to speak with the types of institutions that they have. And these are where I think it's very beneficial for you as an influencer or that counselor or teacher to really help them see maybe that direction. Have they prepared for exams like the SAT, ACT, or English proficiency exam? These are the types of opportunities where perhaps the student doesn't have that access or the SAT has been closed. I think especially during this time right now, maybe knowing the types of institutions that have gone test optional or maybe that are waiving the SAT for that fall 2020 term, these are the types of things that perhaps you can maybe ask each of the institutions, just because I think that there have been so many changes within the last, I would say, 2 months. a lot of our institutions are being flexible and more lenient when it comes to standardized exams, because we know that it's nearly impossible to take overseas. In addition to that, the affordability. So the cost of attendance, what does that actually mean? The tuition, the mandatory fees, health insurance, in addition to room and board, right? These are all things that when you know the type of funding and support that perhaps a parent has and a family has saved for their student, they'll actually then you'll be able to then lead them into an institution that might have better options for them. You want to look at housing on campus versus off campus. What types of opportunities exist if they were to live on campus? Are there housing scholarships? Are there opportunities for them to maybe be a resident assistant later on? If they live off campus, is there a community for the students to live in? And so these are the types of things that maybe perhaps can change. You might want to ask the institutions, is living on campus mandatory? Is it optional? What if I have a family member that lives maybe about 20 minutes away? Can my student live with them and then commute? These are the types of questions that really help in understanding, is this institution affordable for your student? In addition to this, the cost of living in urban, suburban, and rural environments all vary. I will say the housing market in some of these college towns are significant. And I do want to say that only because you think, oh, you know, it's not in a big city where you automatically think New York, San Francisco, they're automatically going to be expensive. Yes, their housing can be expensive, but I've also seen that some of these college towns, because they know that for 9 months, students need a place to live, you actually might see increases in rent. And so you might want to see, hey, talk to their international offices and their admission counterparts and say, what is really the cost, or maybe even the lowest cost that you've seen a student actually pay in terms of studying and living in maybe that college town or that city. And so it all varies, whether you are in, again, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, to even some of our smaller suburban areas or rural college towns within our states. Transportation is a big one. I think that, you know, I've had students say, oh, I just want to Uber everywhere. And I'm like, you don't want to do that. It costs a lot of money. And so what I've suggested to students is maybe looking for schools that have shuttle buses, that have maybe they have train or bus tickets that's also included within their student fees. These are the types of things that actually can help reduce the cost that a student might not automatically think of or a parent might not think of. So I know for some of the Chicago universities here, for Illinois Tech specifically, they have something called a UPass, and that actually is built into their tuition, so they can take the bus and the train unlimited throughout the semester. So if you need to take the bus to the museum to do a project at 2 p.m. or you want to go with your friends to the movies on the weekend, that's all included as well. And then in terms of affordability, scholarships are the biggest thing that I think students are looking for. There are merit-based versus need-based. Those merit-based are going to be based off of their academic performance. What type of grades have they received, in addition to what kind of SAT or ACT a student has. In addition to need-based, some institutions do offer this. They're looking at the expected family contribution. They're looking to see if a student would need more money based off of what is given or provided by their family. In addition to scholarships, I also included those housing scholarships for students on campus. I think that's really important, just to know that you might as well ask and see if there is that type of housing scholarship available. It might be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 to maybe even full housing. It all depends on the institution, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And so that's actually one thing that I will be stressing throughout this is ask institutions, ask the counselors that work there, because they know, we know our schools best, but you know your students better. And so when it comes to one more thing in terms of scholarships, I added the athletic scholarships. So let's talk a little bit about athletics. I don't know if you do have any students who are maybe Division I athletes, where usually those students are recruited, usually about their third year, so their junior year in high school. And so universities at that Division I level are really looking for their students. And some of those Division I schools are offering full scholarships for students, right? That full ride, which includes the room and board, the tuition. But again, these are exceptional students and athletes. And so you really know, you'll need to know if your student is that Division I ready. Usually athletics teams are really looking for students who've maybe been on a traveling team or have played at maybe that like national level. So for example, I had a friend who was on a national fencing team and she was like in the Olympics. I know it's crazy, but those are the students that get, I would say, those scholarships for athletics. Then you have Division II and Division III types of institutions, and they might have scholarships, but they might not be that full ride that you might hear. So just something to think about when you are looking at the affordability in addition to the admissibility for students. Knowing the types of schools is important. I actually saw a question which someone asked about, can a student with a 2-year degree, let me just pull this over here, apply later for a higher education like a master's degree? That's a good question because I'm actually going to address this kind of here within this community college versus a 4-year college and university. Typically, a student would need to have some type of bachelor's degree in order to get into a master's degree later on. So thank you. I think it's Maha for that question. So usually in order to get into that master's or doctoral program, you'll have to have, again, that 4-year degree. So now let's talk about the types of institutions that do exist. You have 4-year colleges and universities. Some of them are liberal arts. Some of them are research intensive. Some of them are art focused, and some of them are specialized technology-based institutions. There are just so many institutions that a student can select. And again, at these institutions, they offer the bachelor, master, and doctoral degree. The bachelor's degree is that 4-year degree. The master's is typically a 2-year degree, and doctoral can be anywhere from 4-year to about 6 years. I added that like emoji that always is like this, just because there are so many. And so this is where I really ask you guys, feel free to connect with us. Connect with the Education USA Center. They know a lot of the schools, and we are happy to share what actually happens at our institutions. Now, the cost of attendance varies greatly on the I-20. They can range anywhere from $12,000 a year to up to $80,000 or even more. So this is really where, when I talked a little bit about knowing the student's ability to pay for an institution, you might want to gravitate towards a school that's $12,000 if you know that their parents might not have the most funding, or if you might know of a student who has perhaps like remittances or family abroad who've been sending money to that family, there might be other institutions that are a little bit more expensive that a student can then afford. In addition to that, I did mention looking for accelerated master's programs. Universities call them 4+1, 3+2. Essentially what a student is doing is they are finishing their bachelor's degree and perhaps adding 1 more year of a master's degree on. So then instead of spending 6 years at an institution for a bachelor and master's, it might be a 5-year degree. And so these are just the types of things that I do stress that you look for in addition to understanding what a community college is. So community college is a 2-year institution here in the United States. Essentially, a student might start off in a community college and then go into a 4-year institution. And so the understanding when it comes to community colleges is that they're taking some of their core classes, their general education requirements that most institutions do require, and then they're going to transfer that with the understanding of they might only need to take 2 more years to finish their bachelor's. The reason why a community college is a good option is some of these institutions are test optional. So you don't need to submit maybe an SAT or ACT, but they might require things like an English proficiency exam like the TOEFL or IELTS, or even something that's becoming a little bit more popular, the Duolingo English test as well. In addition to that, I do want to be forthcoming when it comes to community college, because they are intended for the communities. And so some students live in like with their parents at home, and then they commute maybe within a 30-minute drive. They might have limited housing for residential housing. So that's going to depend on each of the community colleges. I definitely do want to at least let you know that that might be one of the limitations. It might be a little bit of a different feel, but I always want students as well as counselors to know the types of options that do exist. In addition, the cost of attendance may be cheaper than a four-year school. It is true. This is really where I do recommend talking to each of the community colleges. Even here within the city of Chicago, there are at least 7 community colleges. They work in a partnership, but if a student, let's say, wants to transfer to Illinois Institute of Technology, they can start off 2 years at the community college and then go 2 years into one of the four-year institutions. And again, the highest degree that a student can earn at the community college is an associate's degree. This is really important. There are over 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States. Every school will be different, but at the same time too, knowing a little bit about what institutions offer, this is really important. And so make sure that we don't ask this question as much anymore, because we as higher ed professionals really want to help you out and help you understand maybe how you can help your students find their best fit. So resources that I am providing for that are, I would say some of them are free, some of them do exist, but these are things that I do highly, highly recommend. College Board, Career Finder. These are just types of things that a student can look at. I will say no one here is sponsoring this except maybe Education USA, but these are things that perhaps could be free. Some of them require a membership. Some of them are just for you to actually review, but if you are trying to help a student understand what their best fit is, knowing your student is helpful. So Compass Prep is another thing that you can look into, which is that college admissions testing. Education USA. Again, I wouldn't be doing this presentation had it not been for the Education USA Center who connected with me, and I really appreciate everything that they do on the ground. NAFSA is also another opportunity for students and for professionals like you, just to see what type of institutions, because NAFSA encompasses all things in the international sphere, international student services, international admission, study abroad. It's just kind of nice to know the options that do exist. And, I'm always a very big advocate of knowing the students best. So perhaps maybe coming to the United States at the undergraduate level, so finishing the bachelor's might not be when they're ready, but perhaps you could actually ask NAFSA and look at some of the study abroad. If a student were to stay in the universities, like Bethlehem University, could they perhaps then go and maybe there is a partnership or a study abroad opportunity where your student can still get that experience to come to the United States and then return back. And so these are just some of the things that you might want to consider that you might not have thought about. In addition, there's the Council of International Schools. You definitely have a huge network of institutions. Within that group, you have Facebook groups like the College Admission Counseling to International ACAC, and then again, Council of International Schools, which is that CIS. But again, Education USA, it's because of them that I'm actually able to speak with you all. So I really, really do appreciate this opportunity to kind of have this conversation with you all. So I am happy, though, to send this recording over to you guys, in addition, so you guys can see all of these links. So helpful hints from your peers. One of the things that I actually did prior to hosting this webinar was I actually went and I asked a number of my colleagues within some of those communities, so the Facebook community, and I said, if you were a guidance or high school counselor, what is it that you would have wanted to know, or vice versa? As a university rep, what can we do then to help high school counselors? Ask university reps for help. I think that's really important. We're here to help you. We want you to help your students find the right fit, because at the end of the day, I think we all know that a student who has, unfortunately, a bad experience at a university, they go home and that spreads like wildfire, and we don't want that. But maybe it's understanding, could we have helped our students out find that right fit? So then by the time that they graduated from the institution, they're singing nothing but praises about that university that they attended in the United States. And so that's really where we as representatives want to help you out. We want you to understand a little bit about what students are getting at should they come to our institutions. See if universities will accept official copies of SAT transcripts directly from college counselors or Education USA. We know that, like, for example, the SAT costs money to send. You know, even if it's $5 US, that adds up if you're applying to, let's say, 10 schools, right? So if you work specifically with maybe universities, get to know the the university representatives, the admissions counselors, we can say, hey, I actually know that that high school representative, we can accept that as official. So then that way it alleviates some of the costs out of a student's pocket in order to apply to the university, because we know just as well that some of these admission application fees range anywhere from being free, which is great, to almost $100 per application. So if a student is even applying to 5 schools and their application is maybe $100 or maybe $75, that's a lot of money that I know we're asking of students. So it doesn't hurt to ask, and that's really you being an advocate for your students. But we are happy to work with our Education USA Center as well. So if a student actually goes to the Education USA Center, we have worked with their team over there to say, you know, this is coming from Sana, this is coming from Marwa. We could go ahead and accept those documents. Okay, select the right fit rather than a name. This is so important. One of my colleagues said this because I think we all know the Ivy Leagues. We all know some of those highly reputable institutions, which they are amazing. And there's a reason why there's a name there, right? But in all reality, there are so many good institutions. As I said, there are about 5,000 universities and colleges. Some of them you might not even have heard of. And so why that's really important is maybe that community college that you've never heard of is maybe a good fit for your student, and then they can transfer into one of those no-name institutions later on. So just some things to think about when you are helping your students. Consider destinations around the world. So yes, I am here speaking on behalf of Illinois Institute of Technology, partnering with Education USA. But really, to be honest, this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, that perhaps they might need to stay in their home country, and knowing that graduate school is an option for them later on, that is something that is really powerful. In addition to that, keep in mind, students can even go for a PhD. So maybe they're not going for their bachelor's degree or maybe even a master's degree, but some of those programs, especially those doctoral level programs, are usually fully funded as long as a student really has that genuine interest. So perhaps they're not going when they're 18, 19 years old, but maybe they're going when they're 22 years old to a graduate program. So, and at the same time too, maybe that there are schools in the European Union or anywhere else that maybe a student or you can maybe recommend, and then say, but you know what, I know of a school later on that you can look at in the United States. I think that those are just opportunities for you to help your students out. In addition to that, knowing the budget from the student's family. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think when you actually sit down and talk to these parents and let them know the wide range of school costs in the United States or even across the world, this is really important because it kind of sets the tone for helping them understand their expectations, right? Again, schools can be as affordable as maybe $12,000, which include room and board, tuition, mandatory fees, health insurance. But then there are schools that cost $80,000 to over $100,000. It all depends on the parents, the family, the types of resources that they have. But when you're upfront with these students prior, and maybe a student says, and the parents say, we have $25,000 for tuition, room and board, fees, that actually helps in regards to understanding what type of institutions are the best fit for a student. In addition to that, research schools and interests of your students. So again, I think that it's so important for you all to know the types of schools that do exist. Again, there are 5,000. I don't know all the schools, but I know that we are happy and to help you find that type of institution that does exist. And so with that being said, the last thing is help them navigate the admissions process. I think that what gets difficult is that every institution is requiring something different. Some institutions require the same thing. But at the same time, I would say, there are opportunities to apply on the Common Application, the Coalition Application, and then all of a sudden there are their own applications to the universities themselves. And then in addition to that, you actually have requirements of SAT, ACT, English, can I get a waiver for an IB program, or if a student has studied in English throughout their academic curriculum. You don't know unless you ask, so feel free to speak directly with the universities. Usually there is a designated, maybe international person. In addition to that, there may be other people within the institution if they don't necessarily have a specific international designated admissions counselor. So just some things to think about, because we want to help you and we want the students to find the best fit moving forward. So, with that being said, just some friendly reminders. Deadlines. Deadlines are so important just because, again, you have early action, which is a non-binding deadline. You have early decision, which is a binding deadline. And then you have rolling admissions, which is an application is reviewed when an application is completed. At our institution, we have like a 2-week rolling admission. As soon as everything has been submitted, within 2 weeks, the student should usually hear a decision to our institution. Accreditation. This is really important just for you guys all. I think there's about 30 of you all in here, so thank you so much for joining me. Accreditation is very important. Colleges or university meet a standard of a regional or national association. One of the things that I really find to be very important is that we look at regional accreditation. So I know I talked a little bit about community colleges. If you start off at a community college, a student can then transfer to one of those regionally accredited institutions as well. So for us at Illinois Institute of Technology, we are part of the Higher Learning Commission. You want to look for regions. So it'll be like the North Atlantic, or just essentially looking at the demographic of where that school is located. You'll actually be able to see if it's a regional versus a national accreditation. But again, the regional accreditations, usually what that means is we've recognized that institution, and so a student can then transfer into another institution based off of the courses that they've completed at that regionally accredited institution. OPT, I know a lot of students have heard about this, counselors have heard about this, and then they ask, what is OPT? It's an optional practical training. It allows students to remain on the F1 student visa and work in their field of study for 12 months. Students then start asking me, well, is your degree STEM designated, which means that they can have an extension of about 24 months to continue on in that field and perhaps be sponsored by a company later on. So essentially, after they finish, let's say, their 4-year bachelor's degree, they have that option to do 36 months in the United States, which is 3 years. CPT is another term that is used, and it stands for the Curricular Practical Training, and it allows students to work and study. Usually it might be like an internship, but what ends up happening with a CPT, it's during that time that a student is studying in the United States. So that's just some friendly reminders when it comes down to just knowing a couple things, a few terminologies, and things like accreditation, which I think are really, really important. So preparing your students beyond admission. This is really important because I think that that was one of the things that I was tasked and I was asked to look into, which was, can you give us more information about how we can help our students move to life on campus? So what essentially this is that there are a number of Facebook groups, there are a number of opportunities for students to meet alumni from your country. It's just a matter of asking the university representative, hey, do you have someone from this country? Because I'm really interested in maybe connecting with them. I think especially institutions that have maybe a high amount of maybe Palestinians or people from that region, and then we can say, I can connect you with, maybe a Jordanian if you're from Jordan, for example. That usually is very helpful. And connect with Education USA to meet students from the region. I think that, students do go back home, and then they can actually then, set up a meeting and say, hey, this is what my life was like on campus. In addition to that, find out when you need to be on campus. So ask us, when is it required for me to be on campus in let's say August. And if there are airport shuttles or students who will be taking the same flight, those are the types of things that I think help in terms of transitioning a student from their home country all the way into university. So that's just something to think about. On campus and in country, these are some of the things that I really, really recommend looking at. And so I won't lie, I actually just Googled, like, again, this was an event specifically for Palestine, for Ramallah, and the Education USA Center. And then so I actually was Googling, you know what do Chicagoans know, or what is Chicago known for when it comes to like Palestine? And then I came up with a Chicago Reporter article. They call it Little Palestine. It's just a neighborhood in the Chicagoland area where if a student is coming from your region, you know, they want to know that they can get food that they're familiar with. They want to know that when they go and they eat, you know, or they go to a city, that they find some type of things that they're familiar with. And so that's just something that I added that you can look at on the right-hand side, but also orientation. This is essentially where it's so important that a student comes to orientation on time so that they can meet and know what's actually happening once they get to campus. It's so important that you tell your students to be present. I mean, how many of us nowadays are always on our phone? You know, I would just say, tell a student to just put their phone down and talk to someone. It's so easy then for them to make a friend. And I think one of the most powerful things that I've heard about our students is that when they say, oh yeah, one of my best friends is from, let's say, the suburbs of Chicago. So they'll say things like, I went to actually their family's Thanksgiving, and it was a really cool experience to see what that was like. I really recommend this. Meet people who aren't from your home country. You know, I think that is one of the things that essentially transitioned from that. I went to Thanksgiving with an American family, and that was a really cool experience. During orientation, I do recommend that students ask questions, to be present, and just, you know, no question is a dumb question, and it's really important for them to actually be involved in that. Again, resources for students. The International Student Services Office is definitely something that every university has here. Explore the campus and the town. I think that it's a really cool experience to have studied abroad. And so if you have those 4 years, I really hope that students get to explore more than just that college campus and community. Welcome Week for students. This is essentially a time when students come to the United States. They really engross themselves in what's going on. And so I think that what really is important for Welcome Week is that students, again, once they know that everyone who's coming to the university is in their same shoes, they don't know where this hall is, or they don't know where their classroom is located. They don't know who their best friend is going to be. You know what, they're all going through the same experience together. It's kind of nice that they have each other to rely on. Wellness centers and health insurance. This is really important. You know, I think that a lot of students, even during this time, they've been asking like, hey, is the student health and wellness available? You know, I think I just need to talk to someone, a counselor, who can really help address, you know, some of my maybe concerns that I have. Or, you know, like, hey, I don't really feel well. How does a doctor work here in the United States? Because I think every kind of country is a little different when it comes to healthcare. But just knowing that universities do have those wellness centers for students. And again, find other Palestinians from the area. That was just that note that I had over on the right-hand side, the Chicago Reporter. So this is an interactive activity. I won't lie, I'm not sure if it's actually going to work, and I really do hope it does work. But it's actually something called a Kahoot. And what I'm going to try, and I do see that I have some questions. I'm going to actually switch my screens over. Oops. And the reason why I'm going to go ahead and open my Kahoot is because it will allow all of you guys to have this opportunity to have an interactive game. So I'm going to switch now. And if you've never done this before, I think this is a really good way also for you guys to get to know your students. So I'm going to switch my screen over. Window. And so this is essentially, if you are on your computer, you are on your phone, what I'll just ask you guys to do is go to www www.kahoot.it. And if it works, it works. So if not, no worries. You'll go to the pin 3729767. So I'll actually put it in here. And I know I just saw that you have some questions. I will definitely get to that because we do have a question and answer time. If I see at least one or two people in here within the next like 1 minute, we'll move on with this. If not, I'll just go ahead and I will show. I'll go back. Oh, someone's in. Amir, thanks for joining. It's really fun. So hopefully this works out for everyone. Zuhair, hey. Marwa, thanks for joining. Ahmed, thank you for joining the Kahoot. I'll give it a minute or two just because I think that this kind of shows you the types of opportunities that you can relate to your students. Mina, I have 8 players right now. It's just something fun to do, 9 people, so. Okay, I'm gonna probably jump in and we're just gonna start the game. And so it is actually a game, it is kind of fun. It is free as well, so if you and your students would like to use this, I definitely recommend it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start. 14 people is pretty good. So when I start the game, it's gonna say, are you ready? And so essentially, we're going to start the quiz. How many colleges and universities are there in the United States? So you'll see on your screen certain images. Know that those images correspond to a number. I have 10 answers already. And so is it 4,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000 or 5,000? Maha, awesome. Yep, and so we'll just give it 7 seconds. It's counting down. Yep, that's correct. There are over 5,000 schools in the United States. Again, you want to think of technical colleges, community colleges, but these are all considered institutions of higher education that a student can pursue. Awesome job, Loyai. I think this is how I pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correct, but great job. So the next question is a true or false. Community college or junior college is a place to earn a 4-year degree. So is it community college a 2-year place? Is it a 4-year place? Yep, that is correct. So community college is not a 4-year degree earning type of institution. It is only a 2-year degree. And again, a student would transfer into a higher level or a 4-year degree after. So the next question, let's see who is there. Awesome job. Amir's trailing you real close. Early decision is a binding deadline. Is this true or false? So early decision, is it a binding deadline? True, it is binding. So again, it really is important for you to know the types of decisions that do exist at some of these institutions, because a binding, you're already agreeing that no matter what institution that I'm getting into, I'm still coming to this. So just be mindful of a binding decision to an institution, because you're already agreeing without knowing the type of financial package a student would receive. So just that's some keynotes and takeaway. Awesome job. Marwa, look, you're in second already. So again, there are only 2 more questions. What is not helpful in counseling your students? Students' academics, students' budget, students' lunch today, or the student's academic history. So what is not as helpful in counseling your student? Yep. I mean, it's great to know that they had a shawarma for lunch. Maybe it can help you relate to your student. However, it's not necessarily important to actually have that information. I love how it says Marwa is like on fire right there. Okay, last question. What is a way for students to transition from home to their new school? Get involved in Facebook, social media, meet alumni who have returned home, connect with Education USA for pre-departure orientation, all of the above. So what is a way for students to transition from home to their new school? Maha, I'm not sure where your name is. All of the above. I mean, thanks for that one person. But yeah, all of the above is really helpful for students. And so just so you know, I mean, this is just a fun activity for us to do. And I'm going to jump back to the questions after. So Amir, Marwa, awesome. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see who it is. Loya, good job. So again, we like to be interactive. And so that is just something, just because I know people learn differently. So I'm going to jump now back to this presentation, and I'm just going to jump into questions and answers, but also leave my information on the screen for you guys, because I think if you want to be in touch with me, feel free to do that. So I'm going to jump back to the questions, but this is my personal email, Deleon2 at iit.edu. And I'm going to jump now to the questions that we have from some of you guys. So I answered the 2-year degree. Could participating in a couple of MUN conferences be a great thing to mention in an application? Absolutely. I think that part of what happens when a student says, hey, I've been involved in Model United Nations, it really shows that they are a leader on campus. They also have the opportunity to really just have those open dialogues. And I think that that's what Model United Nations really helps with. Izat, yes, I am happy to share this recording with you. I actually have 2 recordings that I need to actually send over to the Education USA Center, and they'll be able to share this with you all later on. Afaf Sami, you have a few questions. Can you tell us, what does it mean for a student to enter a university as undecided for their major? What kind of subjects will they take during the first year? Oh, undecided. Okay. So I am happy to address this, because I think that when a student is undecided, they haven't selected a major yet in terms of the bachelor's degree they're going to select. Now, so for example, when a student would come to, let's say, Illinois Tech, they might already say, I want to be an aerospace engineer. I want to major in computer science. But what if there's a student who says, I like psychology, I like biology, my mom wants me to do something with computers, I'm not sure. And so what can happen is a student can actually select an undecided or undeclared major. So what happens within the first maybe 1 to 2 years, they're taking general education courses that across the board would then be working towards their overall bachelor's degree. So let's back up a little bit, because I know I mentioned a lot about a community college. So a student could actually go to a community college for the first 2 years, save some money because the cost is a little is less than maybe a 4-year institution. But then what they'll then do is take those 2 years of prerequisites and then transfer them into a 4-year institution, provided that those institutions I would say accept those transferable credits. And so this is where that regional accreditation is really important. So a student, let's say at one of our community colleges or junior colleges here in the state of Illinois, might transfer to Illinois Tech. We would award them those first 2 years of courses. Some of the courses that they're taking in those 2 years of being an undecided student include things like English Composition 1 and 2. They're maybe taking a history course. The core curriculum essentially needed for a student to then graduate and have that well-rounded academic experience here in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit more about double majoring? Sure, absolutely. So double majoring is essentially when a student has 2 majors. So by the time that they graduate, a student will actually have, let's say, a bachelor's in communication in addition to a bachelor's in political science. Whatever that student decides to do, they are able to do a double major. Now, every institution is going to be a little different. I know that, so for example, a lot of our students, because we're a technology institution, they might have a mechanical engineering as well as an aerospace double major. So they actually have two courses that are maybe more relatable. So just something to think about when you are looking at double majors. Some of them do sit like on top of each other or mirror each other. Or I've actually had students have like complete different majors, but it does take them a little longer to graduate, and that's just something to think about. How flexible is it to transfer from one major to another? It is pretty easy as long as a student has a good GPA. Now, the caveat there is if they've spent, let's say, 2 years studying, let's say, like psychology, and all of a sudden they say, oh, I want to go into transfer into a computer science degree, they may not have completed all of the requirements to getting into that computer science or those prerequisites. And so it might take them a little longer to graduate with a computer science if they switch their major. That's a caveat there. Can you give us tips on what universities look for in personal essays and how can we help the student? Okay, this is really important because we actually ran across a student who they didn't think they probably did anything wrong. However, unfortunately, they Googled what's the best way for me to talk about getting into a computer science program. They had copied and pasted the first paragraph or the first few sentences of an inspirational essay. And so the reason why that's important is make sure that the student is writing it for themselves. Make sure that they are talking about themselves. But in those personal essays, I know for our institution, we're on the Common Application. Most other institutions that I have worked at have been on the Common App. You know, they ask a few questions like, tell me about a time where you experienced a struggle. And so like you can talk about, you know, like here's one time I experienced a struggle, but the second part about what we're looking for is how did you overcome that? A lot of it is a cause and effect type of personal statement or essay. What we're looking for is how can that student resolve a situation? How were they able to overcome something? And I think that you can definitely have that student write that narrative in a way that's a lot more powerful when they're able to address not only did I experience this, but this is how I was able to resolve it. Those are the types of things that I think really do help in a student's essay. By Lasan, what types of universities give scholarships? This is one of the things that I will say every university is different. You know, for my institution, we offer academic merit-based scholarships. So that's based off of things like their grades and their academic performance, their SAT. And I know that a lot of institutions right now have some SAT waivers. And so it's going to be up to the institutions to determine what type of scholarships a student would be receiving. But in addition to that, I think a lot of institutions do offer scholarships. Some institutions don't always have scholarships, but for the ones that do, you know what, just see and talk to the admissions counselor and see what perhaps that maximum scholarship is. So, you know, I will share like our I-20 cost. So our sticker price is $67,000, but our scholarships range from $10,000 to about $30,000. So essentially, undergraduate student might be paying, let's say, $37,000 per year. That would include their tuition, their room and board, their health insurance, and other costs associated with studying. And that's specifically for my institution for the fall 2020 and spring 2021 school year. So it ranges $10,000 to $30,000 would be a scholarship. Do you mind sharing the record? Oh yeah, you can definitely share this with your students. You know, we are happy to answer questions for you guys. So I'm gonna share this with Sana with the Education USA Center. But again, my email is also here on the screen should you want to connect with me directly as well. Any suggestion for extracurricular activities? You know what, I will be honest, again, what we're looking for is students who are well-rounded, but we also understand that if maybe you have a student who has to run home to help take care of a younger sibling because, you know, maybe mom is the sole provider currently at the moment. Essentially what we're looking for is that you can help narrate that story. So within your guidance, within your high school student recommendation, make sure that you can write about that, because I think that really is important for us to know the types of other things that maybe we don't see because it's not just in their academics, right? So if you know that your student runs home because they have to take care of 2 younger siblings, because mom is working, whatever it might be, help us understand what's going on with those students, because we then will be able to provide a little bit more, I would say, empathy for those students, because we understand not everyone has the ability to be on a football or soccer team or play baseball or has that athletic capability, but maybe you also have limited resources on your campuses, but there is Model United Nation or whatever it might be. Make sure that student just has some type of extracurricular, but again, help us understand if there's something that we're missing within an application. If maybe a student struggled, let's say during one semester, but you knew something was going on maybe in their household, let us know what's going on there, because we don't know. And so I wouldn't want to penalize a student because maybe a semester wasn't as good. Which decision plan is best when applying to a university? Early decision, early action, or rolling? Andrea, that's a great question. To be honest, this all depends on the student. So in my mind, I like the idea of early action just because you get a decision sooner. Early decision is really for those highly selective institutions where the student says, I don't care, this is my #1 pick, I want to go here. So, everything has, I guess, their pros and cons. Rolling admission is good just because there isn't the set deadline. It's as long as everything has been submitted. And so those are the types of things that I would say are helpful. I just think that there isn't really a best. It just might come down to what the student is and also what you're most comfortable with. The difference between merit scholarships versus need scholarships. The merit scholarships are really looking at just like the academic performance, and the need-based scholarships are really also looking at the expected family contribution. And so how much is the parents of the child able to pay? And so, I think that not all institutions offer need-based aid. However, they do exist. And so that is just something to think about. Amir is asking, how can I receive an athletic scholarship? Again, I think, Amir, when it comes down to scholarships, you do want to hopefully have the student or yourself recruited. Do I send a video? Yes, video is helpful. You also can upload them to YouTube and then have each of the coaches or have your coach actually review them. And so that's really important. Essentially, we're looking for athletes who have the best times. If they're like a swimmer, their best scores. We're looking at, if they play a certain sport, how long they've been on a team for. If you have videos, if you run cross country, if you have those times, I would say have your coaches talk to coaches at the universities in the United States, and that really sets up the conversation to hopefully having you be recruited. A few things you'll have to do. Some students would have to take an SAT to be part of the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Some students know that as NCAA. And so that is something that I would recommend for you, Amir, to do. I'll take a few more questions just because I think it's, I know I'm happy to stay on, but also know that I'm also happy to send follow-up emails to you all. What is the average SAT to enter in a business major? That's going to range from institution to institution. I think we've seen anywhere from maybe like a 1,000 to maybe like a 1,300. It's not just the SAT we're looking for. We're also looking at the classes that have been completed. And so that's just something that I highly recommend to you to look at, to see the type of institutions. And like for us, we might be able to go down to 1,100, but as of right now for fall 2020, we are waiving the SAT requirement. So we would be heavily looking at the grades, the letters of recommendation, the personal statement. Mohammed, you have a question. How about having an actual engineering class in the field of auto mechanics lab and an engineering drawing class for 2 years in an industrial high school? play when applying to an institution that's technical, really cares about hands-on education, or aiming to get into a mechanical engineering degree. That's super helpful for us. And I think that for our institution, again, we're science, technology, and engineering mathematics school. So we do focus heavily on looking at math classes. We look at engineering classes if a student has that capability to take those courses. But we understand not every institution has that ability to take a mechanics engineering course. But if you do have that, if a student has that in their repertoire, we then like to see how well they did in that, right? So if a student tells me, hey, I'm really interested in mechanical engineering, they have the opportunity to do engineering courses and didn't do too well in that, that's kind of a red flag for admission counselors. But, you know, if a student has done, you know, on the flip side, very, very well in those mechanical engineering courses, we then really, really highlight that. And we do say this might be a really good student for us. And so does anyone else have any other questions? Again, feel free to chat them in the box. Let me see. I have a few more questions and then I'll take it. Could being a talented, experienced football athlete along the community with MUN certificates, in addition to having a good educational and academic level, give me an advantage in getting a scholarship? I think all of those things do play a role in getting a scholarship. Again, this really goes down to deadlines. Applying early is really key. Making sure that you know if a university does offer athletic scholarships. So for our institution, we don't offer the athletic scholarships because we're a Division III school. But if you are a talented athlete, you want to make sure that your coach is going to be your advocate as well as your high school counselor. And what I would say in regards to the athletics, make sure that you have those videos, you can share them as long as how long you've been on a team for, and have your coach talk to the coaches. He's asking for a 90% scholarship or more. Again, every university is going to be a little different, but if you are recruited specifically for a Division I school, they may have full funding for those scholarships. And I think that really ends my questions for now. Again, if you have questions for me, feel free to shoot me an email at deleon2@iit.edu. Again, I really do appreciate this time that you guys took out of your day. I know it's the end of the day in your area. And so thank you for spending your evening with me. I really do hope to see your students. I really do want to thank Education USA for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. Just because unfortunately I was not able to make it out to, your region. And so I really do hope that we can continue these conversations to bring students from your region to schools in the United States. And so thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening and have a great day. Bye.